I've talked to SIG engineers, former SIG engineers, and they know about it. Like, this is a thing that the company would never admit, but they've known this is a problem for a while. And you can see that with the way that they act publicly, because they did the voluntary upgrade program, where they basically said, our triggers have no problem. There is no issue. You're crazy. You're acting just like your mother. You love being gaslit, baby. Come on.
Yes.
And then, but if you think that there is an issue, which there's not, you could send it in to us voluntarily and we'll fix the issue that doesn't exist.
Right.
You're like, okay, well
that seems
that
like
sense.
it allegedly, it sounds like a lie. Here to discuss this and more is one of the most popular firearms channels on YouTube, the AK guy on X. You know him, you love him, Brandon Herrera. Mr. Herrera, how are you, sir? Can you see me, hear me?
Yes, sir. How's it going, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. And I know that I'm just a ham and egger, so no matter what I say, people say, you don't know anything. So I said, let's bring on the guy who folks actually respect and kind of looks like Andrei Arlovsky. That's a compliment. Let me ask you, this. What's your take on this right now? Because I know that these are allegations, but this is one of those issues that it seems to be like there's something here, in my opinion.
It's definitely an allegation. It's just an allegation that just has tons of documentation and empirical evidence behind it. It's something that we've known this for years. Like, it's been a meme in the gun community that the P320 fails drop safety tests. We've known it forever, but it seems like in the last year to the last maybe 9 months, it's moved beyond drop safety, and now we have guns that are just going off in holsters, which is a completely different ballpark. Yeah. You know, it's one thing to say like, oh, hey, don't drop it at this angle. Okay, it's not great. Probably should have been caught in the trials. That's not a good thing. But when you have cops on video repeatedly that have, you know, any jostling action of a weapon that is in the holster, the trigger is untouched, and the gun's just going off, that is what I would call a problem.
Yes. So now let me ask you this. How did this gun make it through the trials and how was it chosen? Because if you look at the trials, there were a bunch of guns with a longer track record. I mean, the Glock 19 was in there. I'm trying to I believe the Smith & Wesson, one of their shields was in there. Guns that haven't had this problem. You think military, people think efficiency, mil spec. How did this make it through, considering this has been known by so many others, or at least suspected?
For sure. Well, there's a couple different ways that could happen, but one of them, the one that I think is the most obvious right out the gate, is that the military testing, they've got certain parameters that they test for, and they try to test every handgun to the same standard. Those include drop safety tests, but they'll include, you know, hey, it needs to survive X many drops from this angle. And if you're not testing the problem angle, then you're not going to see the problematic result. And so if this particular gun has an Achilles heel that can't be found by the testing that all the pistols were subjected to, you'd never know it in the trials. You wouldn't find that out until a couple of YouTubers start fucking with it.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is the drop issue, right? The drop testing has been known since 2017. But that's not the only issue right now. So this is after, and I know you know this, but for those who are unfamiliar watching, it was a Michigan State Troopers P320 went off. The FBI conducted this investigation, and not all of it was redacted. So SIG sometimes, I believe, has pointed to this as proof that, see, it's safe. But actually, in that report, they say that an uncommanded discharge is possible if sear engagement is lost. And, by the way, disabling the striker safety lock through movement and friction could warrant further investigation. And this is something in there, too. It says a brand new unfired Sig Sauer M18 pistol, which is the military equivalent of 320, was obtained from MSP to determine if the test could be repeated on another weapon. On the first attempt, the striker safety lock successfully prevented the striker from impacting the primed case. However, on the second attempt, the primed case fired, indicating the striker safety lock failed to stop the striker's forward movement. Am I reading that right? That seems pretty cut and dry. There are strikes on the primer, and it's at least, best case scenario, remarkably inconsistent, and this has been known.
100%. And I've talked to SIG engineers, former SIG engineers, and they know about it. Like, this is a thing that the company would never admit, but they've known this is a problem for a while. And you can see that with the way that they act publicly, because they did the voluntary upgrade program, where they basically said our triggers have no problem. There is no issue. You're crazy. You're acting just like your mother. You love being gaslit, baby. Come on.
Yes.
And then, but if you think that there is an issue, which there's not, you could send it in to us voluntarily and we'll fix the issue that doesn't exist.
Right.
You're like, okay, well
that seems
makes
like
sense.
it allegedly, it sounds like a lie.
That is what one would think that sounds like.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I'm no firearms expert, but also I don't believe that companies are very keen to provide expensive upgrades for free for a problem that doesn't exist.
Right. And, it's the thing that drives me crazy, because this has been just a really bad week to be a SIG defender, is that there's just so much evidence. There's so much documentation. I mean, there's the lawsuits that have come out that they've tried to say, oh, these are just people that are trying to make a buck. One of them included a police officer, a female police officer who shot herself on accident with no fault of her own, didn't pull the trigger, nothing like that. Gun goes off in her holster, shoots herself in the femur, shattered. And they said that she's an anti-gun grifter now, apparently. You have ICE that has released a report that basically they were talking about all the accidental discharges that have happened with all of their service weapons. And you have multiple columns. One of them is which pistol it was. Vast majority were the P320s. And then in the other column, whether or not that incident included injury. So they not only said that these things were going off, but there were multiple occasions where they were injuring people that were actively working for ICE. So it's crazy to see this amount of data and be able to say with a straight face, well, clearly there's no problem.
Right. And I will say this for people who don't necessarily know out there, and I know that you know this, there is a difference between firearms companies that focus on selling directly to consumer and some companies that focus on obtaining those giant military contracts. They are not often the same path. Do you think that this same world exists if SIG doesn't have a $500+ million military contract where they effectively crap on their customer base?
No, and I think that could be part of, and this is just speculation on my part, but that could be part of it, where if they admit there is a problem with the civilian side stuff, then they have to maybe go in and revert and do a very expensive upgrade to all their military contract. But that's starting to bleed over, apparently, into both, where now it's this problem, which hopefully, and I've mentioned this before, but hopefully this is a big enough deal with this airman unfortunately losing his life that SIG can no longer look the other way and pretend there isn't a problem. Now there's an investigation. Now there might be a little bit of accountability, and they're starting to backtrack accordingly, at least until they release that email that you so poetically mentioned earlier.
Trigger moving to the rear, Brandon.
It's not public. They didn't publicly say that on social media because they knew they'd get hanged for it. They sent it to all of their newsletter guys, their guys on the inside, who immediately shared it.
It wasn't hard for me to get the scoop. I just signed up.
They're like, for the guys who are gonna defend us. Let me just tell you one more time, there isn't a problem.
Yeah,
it didn't work out.
Yeah, and they were like, well, no, they try and do the wordplay. Like, we all know what trigger pull means, right? You do gun reviews, you go, okay, and the trigger pull is a crisp 6.2 pounds, whatever it is. We're not just going, oh yeah, what it takes to move the trigger. We know what a trigger pull is. That's different from moving to the rear. We've gone a little bit late, so I know I do want to continue Rumble Premium. We'll get you this interview, of course, for all your channels. But where's the best place for people watching right now to find you and watch your coverage of this?
So I just did a video on this one. It's over on YouTube, over on my channel, Brandon Herrera. It's about the recent SIG drama, but you could also go back and a couple of months and see some of the other videos I did covering this exact thing, because this has been going on for quite some time. And some of us have been just shouting from the rooftops, hey, this gun has a problem and it's going to kill somebody. And then unfortunately, here we are, and SIG is continuing to deny it.
Yeah. I know.
I'm a fan.
And I want to discuss this with you because I know and it's a very incestuous place, the gun industry. A lot of people out there are blissfully unaware that firearms companies, and I'm not saying this necessarily about SIG, are not necessarily the same people as Second Amendment activists. As a matter of fact, there have been many instances of firearms companies turning their proverbial firearm against the people who buy their products and support them. And that includes companies, for example, like Smith & Wesson once upon a time, some controversy with Springfield, Bill Ruger. So I want to get into that because what really bothers me is people being led by the nose and taken advantage of when they're going out and using their purchasing power in good faith. And I think that's pretty important. So if you could stick around with us right now, we have to tell the folks here to go to Rumble Premium. And by the way, Mission Control, get a side by side of Mr. Herrera.
Yeah,
and
we have it.
Him and Andrei Arlovsky?
Yes.
Can you send it to him? Look at that. Come on.
Yes.
Come on. I am heavyweight champion of the world. My mouth guard has fangs. All right, Mr. Herrera. I don't know if you were able to see that, but it's identical. The tail of the tape. By the way, it's a compliment. He was the first UFC guy to break out and be a cover model. So good for you. You could
There you go.
you could be a lookalike at parties. I think you have a kick.
Nate Diaz was
If
a
only I
model.
could fight like him.
Well,
there
you
you
don't want the. He's a very good fighter, but then they found out a guy that scary. He just had a glass jaw. Stiff wind put him out, and it's unfortunate. Everyone has their Achilles heel.
It's true.
We have some great chats that I'd love to actually sort of defer to you because I know you're an expert in this area. But I did want to touch on this. A lot of people, so some examples, they think, oh, gun company, they're in our camp. That's not always the case. And I point to this as an example. This is a revolver. And again, for people, we've done this 3 times on air, but you know how it is, Mr. Herrera. There you go. There. Empty.
You just accidentally Alec Baldwin somebody.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right here, this actually does have, for example, a very notorious example, the Hillary hole on the revolver. You see this above the slide there? Yeah, right there. That is something that Smith & Wesson settled because there were a bunch of lawsuits, again, largely from anti-gunners. They call it the Hillary hole. Basically, with Hillary Clinton, you put a little key in there, it basically renders the gun completely inoperable. And some people to this day still hate Smith & Wesson for that because they didn't necessarily have to do it. Bill Ruger, a lot of people, and it's different now, the company now, but when Bill Ruger was running things, he supported bans on higher capacity magazines. He also supported waiting periods. And I think this surprises a lot of people who think, well, I'm purchasing firearms. Obviously, these companies would share my values.
Yeah, 100%. And at the end of the day, it's an industry, right? So like the people that are at the top are not necessarily there, and obviously not all of them, but a lot of the guys at the top are not necessarily there because they share our passion or that they share our values. They're there because they're good at industry. They're good at manufacturing. They're good at MIM manufacturing. They know how to run a large plant. If they could give a shit less if they're manufacturing firearms or they're manufacturing lamps. Like to them, it's just a way to make money.
Yes. And the same thing can be said sometimes about them. I think that many of our men and women in uniform are obviously there to serve their country, but that doesn't mean that the people pushing pencils share the same views. We saw that with the ads of 2 moms and DEI, lesbian, gender, queer Air Force pilots with 7-month pregnant stretchy maternity suits. We're like, what? How does this make us a fighting force? But let me ask you, with the SIG and this contract, I know that you were saying they may not have tested for this, but just looking at those trials, there are guns that would seem to make more sense, have a longer track record. How do you think SIG, I know you're speculating, scored such a big contract with, at that point, a relatively new pistol?
That's an excellent question. There's a lot of, even the Beretta M9, I love that handgun. I think it's a great handgun. We already had the infrastructure for it. We had holsters, we had magazines, we had training. Everybody was familiar with it. I honestly think we were looking for a solution to a problem that didn't really exist. But even then, the Glock, used by law enforcement all over the country for decades now, people are very familiar with it. It's a safe pistol. It's a reliable pistol. That's not just because I'm a Glock fanboy, a little bit of the reason, but
I get it.
But still, like it's the obvious choice, and instead they went with SIG, which is what they did with a bunch of the other military contracts, especially like the NGSW program, like the SIG XM7, which I believe this is now the M7, the infantry rifle. The SIG, I think it's the M250, the new light machine gun. And it seems like SIG has gotten a lot of these contracts. And the question is whether that was based on merit or some otyou thing that I won't say in a public setting.
Yeah.
Do you think it has to do with price? I mean, usually a SIG isn't typically a cheaper firearm, but do you think that goes into...
That's probably part of the equation, but it can't be the only part, right?
No.
One would question what the other parts are.
Okay, yeah.
And it's kind of an openly... It's kind of like an open meme in the gun community as well. Like, oh yeah, I'm sure they got all those contracts off of merit alone, and that's it.
Yeah, no, you're exactly. And we had a very long-standing sponsorship with Walther. The gun industry is hurting in a lot of ways now, but I still love their firearms. And they didn't get, at least at that point, any military contracts because their trigger was deemed too light. Seems like some people have egg on their face now because their trigger was, safe. Right. Which would seem like, to me, if I have to pick light, but doesn't go off on its own, allegedly, well, I'd pick light.
Well, what's funny though too is you pointed out their specific verbiage with trigger moving to the rear or stuff like that. Basically, it doesn't go off on its own, or it needs the trigger to be moved to the rear. That was actually one of the original accusations on the very first drop tests. They were showing the slow motion and it was a problem that SIG later tried to correct, and they took corrective measures while still saying it wasn't a problem.
Right.
That their trigger had the ability to, if you dropped it at a certain angle, the inertia would carry it just enough to set off the gun. So it was still pulling the trigger. It was just gravity and inertia that was doing it.
Right.
And that was the OG models. I think they call it like the fat trigger, the wide trigger, which they then, I was told, now I'll share it, sure. Fuck it. There were engineers at SIG that were basically taking these and dremeling the triggers and dropping them again to figure out how much weight they needed to take off of it to where it wasn't a problem.
Wow. And here's the thing. Okay, so it's a striker-fired gun. For people who don't know, it's different from a double action, single action, right? Most polymer pistols, a lot of them now it's kind of the standard for a lot of them. There are other striker-fired guns with comparable triggers as far as weight. Do they go off when drop tested due to inertia with the trigger?
There's a lot of internal safety mechanisms on a lot of these. I do know, like, for example, I'll say this about Glock. There are aftermarket triggers that people put in Glocks where they will do the same thing.
Yes.
I've actually had a friend of mine that has had an accidental discharge with a Glock, dropping his Glock, had an aftermarket trigger, shot himself in the calf. When you start, screwing with the internals of guns, stuff like that can happen. But most factory triggers are built specifically to not have that problem.
Right. So, yeah, the primary difference is if you purchase a separate trigger, which may, in fact, void the warranty and screw around with it yourself, you may have a problem. Your problem with SIG is if you're using exactly the one they sold you.
Yeah. I opened the box and committed the crime of loading the pistol.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Then an oopsie.
And again, I know that...
My bad.
Yeah. This isn't all proven, but I will say this. We've talked about this, whether it's insurance companies, airlines. You look at auto manufacturers. You look at big banks. When you have a private company and the service is terrible and there's no recourse, invariably it's an industry where the government has backed them through either being too big to fail or they feel as though they don't need to be beholden to the consumer. Yeah. And it feels like with SIG, there's a little bit of that insurance company syndrome of, we're going to be fine anyway because $500 million with the military, bitches. That's what it feels like.
And especially if it's a 10-year contract, all they have to do is just coast and try to keep this as quiet as possible, continue to say that there is no issue until their contract is up. And then if they don't get renewed for the contract, they're done. They've gotten away with it. They've gotten all the money that they needed. They don't care anymore. And that $500+ million contract is like, that's no joke compared to even just their civilian sales. They don't care about civilian sales in retrospect.
No. And there's a very notable difference between companies that make their bones primarily off of civilian sales. I mean, I use Walther as an example because I've had experience. Their CCP was accused of failing a drop test. They couldn't recreate it, right? They did it and they weren't able to, but they still did a recall anyway. Why? Because people are buying their guns, not a military. Yeah. It wasn't something they could recreate. They said, you know what, just to be safe, please send them back. Yeah. And I've had that experience with some other firearms companies as well. I had a problem with a Ruger at one point, but it doesn't matter. They didn't do anything wrong. They fixed it. You had a question there, Gerald.
As somebody kind of coming from the outside, and I'm not a gun expert. I support the Second Amendment. I have firearms. That's fine. I am terrified by what I'm seeing on two fronts. First is the way that we're tiptoeing around the conversation on this, and I understand now, I think, why. Are these companies basically just going after anybody that tries to reveal this kind of information? Are there litigious gun companies out there trying to keep things quiet?
I'm frankly shocked I haven't gotten a cease and desist yet. I think it might be coming soon because I think they're at the point where they, especially this most recent wave, they're losing control of the narrative. Before it was easy to just say, oh, it's a couple of grifters, don't pay any attention to them, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But now, I mean, hell, it's everybody. The conversation has completely shifted. Very few people are defending SIG anymore on this. I mean, how you had mainstream people like Charlie, Moist Critical, that were doing like normie YouTubers, like to the average consumer, not even just in the firearm space, just average YouTube stuff. People were talking about this and getting millions of views. Their reputation is taken poison damage right now, and I think they're going to try to figure out a way to stop the leak any way they can.
Well, no, I mean, I understand making sure that people aren't lying about your product and damaging your company and reputation, but it seems like people are just, pointing out tests and also footage from the nightly news that shows an officer's firearm, firing without being any kind of a trigger interaction at all, it seems, from their hand, which is the main mechanism that I think most people are concerned about. The second thing that I'm a little bit freaked out about, honestly, is the product liability standards. Like, if there's a car that is doing stuff like this, like accelerator sticks and whoops, you end up going 100 miles an hour and can't stop. Like, there's recalls for that all the time. There are recalls. How in the world is something like this existing on a firearm, which I would assume has way more scrutiny than most other products on the market, and not getting these mandatory recalls by some agency that's going like, hey, drop test. There's not that many ways you can drop a gun. Maybe we ought to drop it this way and see if it goes off.
Yeah.
Because their defense so far has been blame the user. Oh, well, obviously it was the cop's fault. They shouldn't have done X.
Prove it.
They're being unsafe with the firearm.
I'm sorry, prove it. Prove it. Otherwise, you have to do a recall.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that's important, Brandon. And again, my hunch is because of the military doesn't want to admit that they screwed up either, and that maybe the testing, their protocols aren't maybe ideal, right? In other words, they would have I'm not saying but they would have a vested interest in being able to say, no, it's not something we missed. And then I get it. They say, oh, it's the wrong holster. But then you have examples where it's not the wrong holster. And they go, it's user error. And then you have examples where it really doesn't seem like it could be the wrong holster or user error. And it seems to me the story changes. That seems to be what people are noticing, right?
And then the question is, why are they issuing them with the wrong holster then?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things that are just stacking up, and it's like, man, me heard lots of different excuses so far.
Yeah, there's a dead serviceman that would like to question you guys on this. That's insane to me. I have no understanding of how that's even possible.
Well, assuming that the story is correct, with that one we don't know. But again, this has been going on for a long time. Let me ask you, Brandon, because we have some chats, and I'd love to direct them to you because we apparently the board is just lighting up. What do you say? First off, you're not paid to trash SIG, right? No one has offered you a check to say SIG sucks. Yeah, I just want to make sure because I know that they'll say that.
No,
want to give you the.
I do this for love of the game.
Yes, exactly. But let me ask you this: people who say, "Well, you don't want to do this because you know what?" Then you give anti-Second Amendment advocates, you give them ammo if you draw attention to this. There are some people who take that position. What do you say to those folks?
I think we give them more ammunition if we don't police our own.
Yeah. That's exactly what I think, too. We've been through that on the more the conservative side of things where we've run into that problem where they were doing the bidding of big tech. We're like, at this point, we got to fix this because there is no future if we don't fix it.
Yeah.
All right. It is Thursday, and so we usually do this to us, but let's do it with Mr. Herrera. It's time for Chat Thursday.
Chat.
All right, Noodles, bring up the best chats for Brandon Herrera. And if anyone here has questions for me, it could be chats here. You got an expert.
All right, first chat from chat. Rectal Fury asks, question for Brandon. Where's the AK-50? It says, just kidding, plan to run for office again with these new Texas districts.
So AK-50 is in my shop. Don't worry, baby is safe.
Okay.
Do I plan to run for office again? I don't know. We'll see what the tea leaves say. Honestly, running the first time was probably one of the worst 9-month experiences of my life. And I would love to not repeat that again, but at the same time, they're not voting any better.
Yeah. All right. I don't blame you. But, that's kind of the quandary is we want people who don't really want to do it in that job, but you have to go through doing it. So I don't know. Go play with guns, and that's more fun. Just not a SIG P320. Next chat for Brandon.
All right, Bastimus asked me for a solid, so question for Brandon. LWC and unsub crew range day?
What is that? Is that a question? Oh, that we go to the range?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm down. Yeah, anytime.
I'm down. And let's make sure we have the Fang mouth guard. And some cycling shorts for him. It is uncanny. I feel like I'm talking to Andre Arlovsky. It's a good thing.
I can put on an accent if you want.
Yes, exactly. They should. Who used to do that? Was it FPS Russia?
FPS Russia.
Yeah. What was the name of that channel?
That was it. FPS Russia.
Yeah, FPS Russia was Kyle. He's got his own the PKA podcast now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he just used to go out and do a fake Russian accent and blow stuff up. That was early YouTube. Those were the days, the Wild West. All right. Noodles.
The American
Another
dream.
chat. We'll set that up, a range day.
All right, next chat from DJ Deep Throat.
Hey, now.
Question for the crew. What is the worst gun you ever shot? Mine was an AK style 22.
Brandon, does one spring to mind for you?
So many. There's so many bad guns. I really I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like an M1000, but it was the Crossfire. It was like a pump action 223 rifle, and you could flip a switch, and it was a pump action shotgun on the bottom, but just neither one worked well. And if you decided to pump the gun while it was on safety, it explodes.
Oh, yeah. That sounds bad.
Working as intended.
Give those to the terrorists.
Good thing,
That's
though,
perfect.
The gun isn't manufactured anymore, so if you put the gun on safety and decide to pump the action, parts will break that cannot be replaced.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Like fingers.
I'll tell you what, my worst one, you're going to be surprised at this because I bought it, and if people go through my social, they will find it. I was so happy to get it. I got a pristine used CZ75, and I couldn't get through a single magazine with it. Now, I purchased it in Michigan, but it had California compliant magazines. So it could have been a magazine problem. And I also read afterwards that it just hated Blazer brass. And for some reason, I had a bunch of that at that point in time. But I know it's the only one that exists because it's a fantastic firearm. But I just traded it in at that point. I was like, I can't get this thing to work. That was mine. Yeah. And then the other one, this is not a problem with the firearm at all, just to be clear, because they make some great stuff. But the North American Arms, and actually I recommend some of their firearms, but they have the Guardian is super, super tiny. And it's fine in 32, but in 380, it's like a bomb going off in your hand, where it's way harder to shoot than a 357 Magnum. The gun was reliable, worked. I did not enjoy. It's a get off me gun. I could hit nothing with it. I don't know if you've ever shot it, but it's really difficult. In 32, it's kind of fun, but 380, no.
Yeah. The smaller the gun, the harder it is to shoot. Scott from Kentucky Ballistics at one point handed me, he had a little like that style of like Derringer, but it was a single shot Derringer in 45-70 government.
Oh boy.
And that I genuinely think it gave me nerve damage.
Yeah, I can imagine. You ever fired a 357 Magnum like J-frame airweight? You ever done that?
No.
It's silly. You're like, this shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
This should not be a real thing. In 38, it feels like dynamite in your hand. But in 14 ounces, I think, and 357 Magnum, there's just no way. There's just no way to use. I mean, you probably could in an emergency, but you're like, why does this even exist?
Yeah.
So, but I haven't had any just break in my hands like Elmer Fudd's rifle or shotgun being turned back on them like you did. But these were just unpleasant guns to shoot.
Exploding in your hand sounds like a bad thing that people ought to know beforehand. So, a question that I just got a little bit off topic, but on topic for some of the things that you've talked about that we've talked about. We're no fans of APAC. We've made that very clear. What kind of? Well, he is. He's not either. What kind of crap have you gotten for your position on that?
Normally, if people know enough to know what APAC is, they're probably not a fan. I didn't know much about them, to be perfectly honest. I didn't know a whole lot about them before I ran for office. And they approached me. We had an interview, and I was just perfectly honest with them. And I thought we had a pretty decent rapport. And I don't know. I didn't really think anything of it. And apparently I didn't give them all the right answers they were looking for, because in a race where we were polling pretty good, we were actually polling fairly ahead. They came in the last 2 weeks and spent over $2 million against me.
Wow.
Which,
jeez.
Yeah, it was a 2-week ad blitz at the very, very end of the runoff election, and it ended up costing us. We lost by 4 votes. We would have won.
Oh my gosh.
Say that the number again. Sorry, you jumbled the audio.
It was 407 votes. So if we had flipped 204, then we would have won. We lost by 1%.
Yeah, and that's and I always tell people, look, this has nothing to do with your position of if you want Israel to wipe every last member of Hamas off the face of the map. That's my position. But I hate APAC for the same reason I hate Act Blue. They give to Hakeem Jeffries, and they give to Cory Booker, and they have that kind of influence in a runoff where they don't have the same interests or values as people who may not realize the influence they have.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I went from not really knowing anything about them to knowing that, hey, you just spent a couple $1 million against me, cost me an election over something that I don't think that was pretty uncool. I'm going to have to do some more digging on you.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Unfortunately, a lot of people on the right equate support for the idea of Israel, as a people, as a nation with APAC, and it's not the same thing at all.
Absolutely.
let's grab, and that's a very balanced view. And unfortunately, in the age of the internet, if you hold that, then people call you both a Nazi and a Jewish shill. So join the club.
They did
T-shirts.
both, actually.
Yeah, I've gotten both in the same day from the same person.
I've done it in the same post on X just to piss everyone off.
I got in the same phrase, you Nazi Jewish shill. It's like,
I don't
what does
know
that even mean?
Living oxymoron.
All right.
Nazi Jewish.
Yeah. It was more offensive to me than Jew fag because that was just funny.
It's a
You're a
niche.
Jill.
Yeah, I've been called a Jew fag. I'm
You're
like,
a
first,
Jill.
I'm a large Jew. Let's go to the next chat.
All right, next chat from Legacy 411. What's Brandon Herrera's thoughts on the S&W M&P? It's affordable and reliable. Does he have any others that are comparable to it price and quality wise?
It's my first one.
I own one. Yeah, they're decent. I think the trigger is actually pretty good, especially the competition version. I like the 2.0 or something like that. I don't remember, but their performance center one's actually pretty decent. But in my opinion, my heart lies with the Glock. You can get them for like $450. There's really no excuse to not have one at this point.
Yeah. I know a lot of people. I mean, I've people know that I was a revolver guy until I bought some Walthers and had greats, and I just fired them really well. But let's be honest, at a certain point when you get to that tier, we'll just separate SIG for a little bit. It's kind of like, do you prefer BMW? Do you prefer Mercedes? They're pretty reliable and they're good, and it comes down to what you value. And Glock is certainly a very reliable firearm with a track record, and then you have all the accessories in the world that you would want for Glock. Mm-hmm. They're so ubiquitous.
Yeah, and I think once you get above the $400 price point, it really comes down to preference on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case. And then if you don't like firearms and you're not just I'm like, hey, get yourself a revolver and trim it a little bit, put it in your nightstand, and go blam 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 blam. I'm okay with it. Next.
Yeah, I do have a heart out, guys. I'm sorry, I do have to bail.
Oh, I'm sorry, we forgot. We were keeping you for chat because they were all asking you. But where's the best place for people to find you? And then you go, and we'll have Nick take us into the scent of madness.
You got the AK guy on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it nowadays, and then over on YouTube is just Brandon Herrera. But seriously, man, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure talking with you guys and talking shit. And yeah, we'll have to have you out at the range sometime.
Absolutely. Let me know if you get sued. Brandon Herrera, everybody. Hey, do you like what you saw? I don't know how because it's on YouTube and we have to cut all the good parts out. So you should tune in live weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern on Rumble. We can still speak freely and even use words like and get and whoa. You've been here this whole time?
Yeah. Snuck in.